Welcome back to super-centex podcast with my usual crew here, Chad and DJ. Chad got a haircut. DJ got
it was good, huh?
DJ
the haircut plus playoff beard. I'm not a good-looking guy, but haircut plus playoff beard gives me kind of like a look anyway,
I have haircut on my to-do list, and I can't get around to it because I just have too much crap to do.
I love my bangs trimmed.
There you go. Okay.
Like that, hate the shirt.
I love it. Obviously, that Lorena-Franklin rematch kind of sets up as one of the most enticing games of any classification in the state this week. So you always hear the cliche that it's hard to beat a team twice. What does Lorena have to do to make it happen?
Chad? Well, I mean, I covered the game that they won on the last second field goal, and they won the second half of that game 31-14.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Convincingly, yeah.
And just beat them up and down the field, which is something I said last week too, I think. They just absolutely pounded them. And I don't think it's like, I think in a way Franklin beat them in the first half and couldn't beat them in the second half. And Lorena has to go into this game with a lot of confidence because of that. Now, I feel like there's so many schools out there and so many times you see a game like this and in the aftermath, something happens and you go, oh, well, so-and-so didn't have this player and that player for that first game, and that made a big difference and blah, blah, blah. And it's hard to know, up and down Franklin's roster, who they had or didn't have for that game. So maybe there will be a factor like that comes in. But, to me, if you just look at the way that other game went, the way the Lorena season has gone since then, man, I mean, it's Lorena feels like the team to beat in 3A Division I right now, even with Malakoff and Winsboro out there.
So, DJ, you are covering this game, and should be a fun one. What's Lorena's path to victory here?
I think they have to be as close to perfect as they can be, because you can't make mistakes against a team like Franklin that you've already beat by, as close as that game was, and even though they took off in the second half, they have to be perfect from start to finish in order to beat Franklin this week.
Now, okay, I see what you're saying, and that's how I felt about their game last week as well. But when they played at Franklin in October, that was October, right?
Wow.
It was game 5 of the Astros Rangers series, right?
Oh, shut up.
Shut up.
Which the Astros won.
Oh, okay.
The Astros won that one.
I've blanked the whole series out of my mind now.
But Lorena turned the ball over 3 times in that game. They threw 2 picks and lost a fumble. And so, but at the same time, they gained 560 yards of offense.
But can they count on doing that again? I mean, I do agree with DJ that you can't go into this game thinking, oh, we can turn it over 3 times and still win.
No, I think that's true. But I mean, I think you take some comfort from the fact that you didn't play a perfect game and still won the game on their home field.
Yeah, and what I mean is, like, there's no such thing as perfect football, right? Mm-hmm. And like we saw it the entire season. Like we were just talking about Marlin and how they kind of hurt themselves, not just during the playoffs, but during the season. They played some really tough opponents and games that they could have beat them by a lot more than they did. And really, it was just because of little mistakes and things that they did to hurt themselves.
Right. And I was saying the same thing when they were going to play Columbus last week, is that they've got to play as well as they're capable of playing. And then they beat Columbus 42-21. And so to me, that whole equation flips around, and it's Franklin that has to play as well as they can possibly play to beat Lorena.
Here's the thing I'll say. So in talking with the Chilton guys yesterday, and I'm bringing them into this narrative about Lorena and Franklin, I was like, what happened in that Granger deal? You guys lost the first one by a field goal, and the second one is just 45 to bagel. Are you kidding? And they were like, yeah, we took them too lightly. And we also did not take practice seriously that week. And lesson learned. And I think to their credit, they've taken practice seriously the rest of the way. And so what I say all that to say this: Franklin is going to be motivated. They're going to want some revenge on Lorena. And so
I don't think it's going to matter.
And you saw the two teams play. So I mean, I'm not dismissing your take, but I do tend to agree with DJ that Lorena can't go out and just fumble the ball around and and get another big deficit and have to climb back.
No, you're right. But I think without being too hyperbolic and too bandwagony, I think Lorena is Mike Tyson in its prime right now.
Interesting. As Zach said on the After Dark, they're a fun team to watch right now. And DJ is getting a fun game to cover. Did you have any more thoughts you wanted to finish, DJ?
We all picked Lorena, by the way.
We did.
Yeah. No, I mean, I just think it's gonna be a good game for Texas football, no matter what the outcome is, and I get to be there.
Yeah, fun.
And hey, I planned it out so that we could all get to be there, and y'all.
Yes, I squashed it, and so yeah.
But also, Michael doesn't have a car right now because he got in an accident on the way to the TCU game. So, yeah.
Yeah, I heard about that. I was talking to him about it last night. So we referenced it earlier, but if Mart and Chilton both win, we would get an all Central Texas game in round 5 of the playoffs. So we're talking state semifinals. It happens fairly regularly. I would say at least one game each year in round 4. We usually get like a regional final that's all Central Texas because it makes sense. They're in the same region. Oh, by the way, my wife says I say that too much, so I need to work on that. Y'all help me with that. Apparently that's my verbal crutch.
I haven't really noticed.
I hadn't noticed, and now I'm very self-conscious about it.
I feel like you say it so often that it's just like
yeah, it's just a thing. Yeah. And now I'm hearing myself say it. So thanks, Janet. But anyway, did DJ freeze on us? She looks like she froze. Oh, there you are. Okay. It looked like you froze for a second. All right. Back to Mart and Chilton. On me. Okay. So how cool would that be to see, two Central Texas teams going up against each other in the state semifinals? It would guarantee us at least one team in Jerryworld.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Go ahead, DJ.
I think it'd be pretty cool. I mean, when I saw it, as I was looking at who Mart was going to play after they beat Deweyville and its Lovelady, and then I saw Chilton in that same region, and I was like, oh shoot, like this is going to be, state semifinal matchup if they both win, and it's pretty exciting. I mean, like we all know what Mart does, and we've kind of been slacking on Chilton for a couple seasons, but they've also been ranked all year. I don't know. It should be pretty good. And either way, like you said, we're going to end up covering a Centex team in Arlington, and it's going to be a 2A team because, that the majority of our teams right now are a 2A, 1A. We all won
3 out of 4, right?
Yeah.
Well, we have 6 altogether, and so
in 11 man, 3 out
Mart,
of 4.
Chilton, and then Lorena's 3A, and the 2.
So Chad, you famously covered Mart and Chilton, a couple years ago, where where
yeah,
you
Chilton was on the rise again, right?
Yeah, you had given
and I
Chilton
was like
some
kind of on the
love.
Chilton bandwagon, and like I made the mistake of suggesting that Chilton,
Had a
could
chance.
hang with Mart. Yeah, that had a chance. And I get to Mart, and they're like, "Come on, man,"
and they were right, weren't they?
Yeah, well, Chilton wasn't ready for it then. Hey, I'll throw this question back at y'all in a way. If you're Mart and Chilton, what would be your choice of stadium to play? I mean, you could go McLean, that's probably a little bit too big. You go Waco ISD, you can go Midway.
It feels like Waco ISD to me. I mean, Midway would be another very similar option, but I agree that you probably wouldn't want to pay the higher rental fee. We're getting in the weeds here, but McLean has a higher rental fee than those other stadiums. And that crowd, you're not going to get 45,000 people there, 40,000 people.
Right.
But could you make a sizable dent in the capacity at Waco ISD? Sure, you could.
Yeah,
I think
Waco ISD probably has the better accessibility, better like equal stands on both sides, or accommodating stands on both sides. I hadn't been to Midway so long, I can't remember what the visiting stands look like right there.
I gave you a shot. So DJ talked about going to a game that didn't involve anyone China Spring was going to play and seeing Tyler Beatty there. I think Mart Chilton, and if that happens next week, that's the kind of game where all the coaches who aren't playing anymore, all those Central Texas football fans who just want to see a good game, are going to come out for that.
Well, I mean, there's going to be, if there's not 10,000 people at the Lorena-Franklin game Friday night, it must be because of the weather or something, right? I mean, that's a get in your car and go down there for it if you like high school football in Central Texas at all, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, and you mentioned like, overlooking a team, not practicing hard enough for a team or what, and going into a game. But I mean, if you're Franklin, the first time you played Lorena, they won a state championship the same year you did the first time, right? It's like, arguably the best or second best team in your district, right? And so to me, there was no overlooking Lorena, and they were going for their 40th straight win at that moment in time too. So there was no overlooking Lorena for Franklin the first time around. But anyway, I think it's a great game. I'm going to go to Athens for the Mart game and get to shoot that one and cover that one for us. But I'll be tracking on my phone for sure, the Lorena-Franklin.
Absolutely.
Make sure you get photos of Armando Chavez so that we have recent photographs of the soon to be national record holder in extra points.
Yeah. Good point. I'll leave myself a reminder for that.
That's cool. That's super, that's a great achievement, really. I had a great time out in Chilton yesterday. As I said, I had a really busy day, but got there and coaches were super helpful. Benny Hewitt was in a meeting, and I had to wait for him about 20 minutes, but whatever. And so I'm sitting there and I'm taking a little bit of video of the start of practice, and I'm one of the coaches came over to me at one point, was like, the guys have been asking us, Coach, who is that guy? Which I thought was funny. But anyway, what I really just liked was their vibe out there. It was almost Remember the Titans-esque. They got some songs that they do and some some grooving they do at the start of practice, and the coaches like, it's a great day to be a pirate.
Last year for a high school notebook, I talked to a guy that was a former football player at Chilton and who was on the team the first time that they won a state championship. And the way he talked about Chilton, like, you can tell that they loved like they love football out there.
Yeah.
You know, they and we talked more about, you know, what it was like, because that was the first team that was like an integrated team, right? And so we talked a lot more about like what the atmosphere was like at that point of time, and you know how everybody handled that. But you know, he just talked about how much everybody just really appreciates football at Chilton, and you know how much it has gone from the time that he was playing football there to now. So yeah, I can't imagine the vibe at Chilton football just
Yeah,
being
it's great. And you know, like you see in a lot of these small towns, you know, you see the signs encouraging them and happy Thanksgiving, go Pirates, you know. I mean,
yeah.
all that kind of stuff is cool. And not to get too deep into the weeds, but like you know, talking with Benny for a while, we talked on the record, but then just, you know, I turned my recorder off and we were just talking and talking, you know, I said, you got several guys that you've known for a while on this staff, right? And yeah, he does. Guys that he's known from like Marlin and, you know, but obviously there's also coaches that he hasn't known as long, but yet they've kind of all embraced one another. And he said, you know, we say, look, you know, if we're not getting along in that coaching room, you know, that's going to come out here to the field and everything. And so, yeah, it's a good vibe right now. And so, yeah, I think it's good to see. We'll see how, if we can get a Mart Chilton matchup. Our remaining playoff teams definitely did not find themselves in a post Turkey Day food coma. All 6 that we have left won by lopsided scores, including mercy rule wins for our 2 6-man programs, Jonesboro and Oglesby. Nevertheless, we recognize that we're probably not going to come away with 5 state champions. And the reason I say 5 instead of 6 is because, of course, Mart and Chilton are in the same division. So we can't get 6. Some of our teams have an expiration date in these last 3 weeks. So which of them has the toughest game in round 4, do you guys think?
Well, the obvious answer is Lorena, right? But I think Marlin-Tolar is probably also going to be a pretty tight game, and Jonesboro is playing Gordon, who beat Abbott. So that's also, I think, a tough matchup. Yeah, and when I say Marlin has a tough game against Tolar, that's the team that knocked them out of the playoffs last year. And
convincingly, yeah.
Yeah. And while I think that the Bulldogs are a better team this year, and I mentioned this in my column, they just have had a tendency to hurt themselves all year long with just little mistakes. And so I think that's just a pretty tough matchup, but also a game that, you know, has a lot of weight to it. So, yeah.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned that, because they shot themselves in the foot several times in the Coleman game, and they saw a 36 lead turn into a 30-28 survival in that game. And honestly, kind of surprised Coleman didn't get the 2-point conversion that would have tied it. So, and then they come back the next week, and okay, they fumbled twice in the first quarter when they were going in to score. So yeah, they hurt themselves a little bit there, but they recovered from that and really dominated the game. It was one of those sucker type of games when I'm like, okay, all right, I'm going to believe in them. I'm going to be like, okay, they're going to completely flip the script on Tolar this week. Like part of me thinks that very well could happen. And I'm excited to cover the game tomorrow night. Now, if I was an objective observer, if I was outside the coverage area, if I was outside of, you know, shaking Ruben Torres' hand and talking with Jameer Hartsfield and those kids and things like that, you know, I'd probably be like, easy pick, Tolar, you know. Go ahead, Bryce.
I did pick the Rattlers, but I'm with you guys that clearly Marlin is better than they were last year. I don't think it'll be, what'd you say the score was?
71-18.
71-18. It's not going to be 71-18 again. That said, it's a tough game for a reason.
Yeah, and I think that is the toughest, challenge that any of our teams face this week. Falls City, I don't think were a ranked team at the end of the regular season that Chilton plays. I may have overlooked it. Maybe they were, but
no, I don't think so.
uh,
They're 9-3, or 10-3 now.
mhm.
And talking with Benny Hewitt yesterday when I was out in Chilton, he's really impressed with their quarterback. He's not big, but he is fast, and so I said, "Oh, so you're gonna have to have a spy on him?" And he was like, "Oh yeah, they're definitely gonna have their eyes on the Fall City quarterback." That said, I do like Chilton in that game. I like Mart to win. Um,
Which would give us Chilton Mart next week.
it would. Now the Chilton Falls City game, I think, it's I don't see Chilton going out and winning 45-0 like they did last week against Granger. But and back to Lorena for a second. I mean, we talked about the Lorena Columbus winner potentially being like the state favorite now. I certainly think that you could put the Leopards in that category, but as DJ,
I think that's true. I think that's the case.
yeah, but as DJ said, I mean, it this opponent does jump off the page a little bit. They are the defending 2-time defending state champions. So finally, guys, it is that time of year where coaches start changing jobs and teams make changes at the top. And Bosqueville's Clint Zander stepped down this week after a 15-year run leading the Bulldogs. So that program has fallen on hard times the last 2 seasons after a long run of being in the playoffs every year. They were 1-9 this season, Bosqueville was. But it is a school that still has had a lot of success in other sports. They were good in volleyball this year, state ranked. They're always, generally very good on the diamond, baseball, softball. So what do you guys think? Is this a, quote unquote sleeping giant, or at least can it get back to being, a perennial playoff contender?
Chad, you want to go first? I'm
still getting my it's a tough question to answer. I don't really, you mentioned getting into the weeds a minute ago. I don't really want to get into the specifics of why I think the things haven't gone well the last couple of years out there in Bosqueville. I know that there's, at least one guy that I can think of that was a super-centex player and then just wasn't a football player anymore. So that's a tough situation. I think it's probably, though, I think Bosqueville is a job where a lot of different, coordinator types in Central Texas would look over there and go, I'd like to try my hand at being a head coach at a place like Bosqueville, Of course, you're sandwiched right there in between China Spring and La Vega. So the question is, are your good players going to, move 10 feet to the west or east and go play at those schools? Or are you going to get a lot, and I don't want to act like high school football is a transfer portal situation. It sometimes feels like it is in Central Texas because we see kids move from one school to the next a lot. But I guess what I'm getting at with all of this is Bosqueville's numbers have to get better. I think in the program, their overall depth has to get better than it has been.
Participation numbers, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I mean, whenever I drive out there, like it's so close to China Spring that I'm just like, it's so easy for a lot of those kids to just look at, the Cougars with 2 back-to-back state championships and a team that is like buying, and then a baseball championship on top of that. Just like a program that seems to be growing every year and be like, I want to be part of that. And then on top of it, it's just because it is so small and those kids are going from football to basketball to baseball, and volleyball to, basketball, to softball to track. And, they're there from the time that they're tiny to the time that they graduate. I think it's more of just like maybe, you get tired at a certain point, and like maybe you're like, well, I got to choose one sport over another at a certain point. It's I think eventually if the right people are there and they can build a sort of culture about it, I think they've got the potential to be bigger. Because I mean, you look at Crawford and they're like way out there, and they're a team that even on the years that they're not doing as well as they usually are, they're still doing a lot better than a lot of the other small.
They're still in the playoffs, right? Yeah, I think that's exactly where I was going to go, DJ. I think it's a great point. Would you look at Bosqueville and Crawford and each of their respective athletes and say Crawford is just, miles ahead of Bosqueville just by sheer athleticism? I don't think you would. I think, the kids are similar, and so what makes the difference in Crawford? You mentioned that word culture, and it gets thrown around a lot, and sometimes maybe it can feel a little meaningless or whatever. But Crawford absolutely has a culture, and it sort of builds on itself, and it bleeds from one sport to the next. And those kids go out on the field and they expect to win, and that matters. And one of the things though they talk about with like playing Crawford in volleyball is we've got to clear this mental hurdle that we can beat Crawford, and so Bosqueville needs kind of a culture shift, I think, and that's not a slam on Clint Zander at all. I actually think Clint did a really good job. Obviously he had a long sustained run of success, and if you also add in the fact that for a good chunk of that he was also the head softball coach. They went to 3 state tournaments, they won a state championship. That's nothing to sneeze at. So
when you get into these 2A schools too, and we've been talking about Crawford and talking about Bosqueville, Chilton, Mart, all 2A schools, probably all pretty similar in size, and all of them have ebbs and flows. I mean, Mart, it's less obvious when your ebb is
11-2.
Yeah, and when you expect to win the state championship every year, and when you don't, that's your low tide, But Chilton, Chilton went through 5 or 10 years of not being very good, probably closer to 10 years of not being very good. Crawford, even though they're pretty consistent, they've had a 5 and 6 year in there. They had not a great year this year, and so because it's 2A, because it's a small school, the depth is gonna rise and fall a little bit, and that's gonna, and it affects how whether or not coaches stay there and whether coaches are asked to stay there, I guess. Because like when we were talking about Chilton a minute ago, I was thinking about the fact that Lucky Gamble has had success there since I've been around here. Robert Little had success there since I've been around here, and now Coach Hewitt, right?
Benny Hewitt.
Benny Hewitt's having success there.
Yeah, and I agree with all of that. There's Bosqueville has had coaches who've come in and done it for a short time and then left, like a Lee Wigginton. He was a guy that kind of used Bosqueville as a stepping stone to other jobs. He coached at Mahia, and then he got up to like 5A, 6A level, and John Bechtel spent several years at Bosqueville, and then now he's at Fairfield and has been there a long time. Clint Zander spent, 15 years at Bosqueville. So what Bosqueville needs, I think, is someone to come in, establish that culture, and then stick around, and do it for a long time. So we'll see who they hire. As Chad said, I do think there'll be coordinators and stuff, maybe even head coaches at programs that they just feel like they need to move, and so I think they'll have some interest in that position. So I think Bosqueville has the chance to get a good coach, and so we'll see how that plays out. We'll follow how Midway does in terms of its coaching search. DJ's gonna inquire about that this week, but at any rate, tell them where you're gonna be this week, Chad.
Yeah, well, like I said, I've got another 3-night and 3-city, 3 different game run coming up.
Okay.
Because I've got Marlin-Tolar tomorrow night, Thursday night in Midlothian. And then I picked the Mart straw for Friday night, the Mart Lovelady ball game in Athens, Texas. Just been a place near and dear to my heart recently, last year or so.
Okay.
I have a biography coming out about Tommy Bowman, and he's from Athens. And then I've been commissioned as a photographer to shoot TAP state championship game involving Lubbock Christian on Saturday night. So I love those 3 nights in 3 different cities, 3 different ball game runs.
Fun times. DJ will only do 2 and 2 nights, but DJ, where are you headed?
I'm going to Georgetown for Lorena-Franklin, and then I'll probably catch whatever happens on Saturday, I guess.
So there's 2 different 6-man options. I was going to mention to you that Ken Surrey has volunteered himself to go to the Oglesby game. So what we may do is see if Ken can write us up something and do a little Chad double here. Write us up something and give us some photos, and maybe you can go to the Jonesboro game. How about that? So
I mean, if you're covering 6-man, it's just a choice of what town has the best barbecue, right?
Both places are about equally as far away from Waco. So Weatherford and Dublin, they're both about an hour and a half. So we'll talk about it, DJ. We don't have to break that down on the podcast.
Well, if I go to, actually no, I was thinking if I go to Weatherford, I can swing by Arlington and watch this game.
Oh, okay. There you
go. Well, that game will be later.
But that like I don't know if I want to wake up that early to drive to Arlington.
All right, we're definitely in the weeds while DJ is planning her weekend. We'll see y'all later. See ya.
All right.